Hey guys, this is Reynolds here. Today we're going to be doing a little bit of a my thoughts video kind of on PoE's current game state. And to clarify, I'm talking about PoE2, Path of Exile 2. So I spent about roughly 500 hours playing this game on Solo Self-Found or the Iron Man equivalent. Now a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is regarding the endgame, so if you don't really know too much about Path of Exile 2, you may not really get it, but I still wanted to put my thoughts out there for the PoE players to let them know what I think about the game, especially when it comes to the endgame experience as an SSF player. So let's first go over what I have accomplished on this build, what it looks like right now, and then why I'm going to be probably putting the game down for at least, or taking a pretty big break on it overall. So right now we're running a typical, I'm going to say very typical, the build is nothing crazy, attribute stacker Invoker mug. I feel like this build is very easy to play. Playing Invoker, I didn't have to build Spirit, and going Chaos Inoculation, I didn't have to build Chaos Resist, and that felt pretty nice. Two stats I didn't have to worry about, and then obviously I can exclude life, and because I don't go Mind over Matter, I don't really care about mana too much either. Skill tree, this is what it looks like. I'm not really going to go over it in depth too much, but here's what it looks like. Most of the jewels, besides this one rage one, are pretty much, maximum energy shield. One or two of these will have additional stun threshold to help deal with stuns, but overall this is maximum energy shield and some crit. Some of these do have some freeze buildup, and that's because freeze buildup is my primary way of dealing with elemental resistances. You might be wondering, Reynolds, why didn't you just go crit and go sunder my enemies? The reason I didn't go crit and sunder my enemies is because currently, or at least at the time of making this video, I was grinding on expeditions, and there are remnants, and there are also waystone mods that heavily decrease your DPS when critting. So that gives you a very deceptive tooltip DPS where, although you're critting very often, very hard, you still don't deal damage, and that was something that I was encountering, especially when I was running those mods, where if I wasn't critting, I was basically dealing no damage. That being said, I do think crit quarterstaff, even when attribute stacking, is overall very, very strong, and I can see why a lot of people build it, because it is very strong. It definitely is the higher DPS option on a long-term average. I have decided not to go crit, and I just basically spec defensive stats instead, and raw damage. And honestly, my DPS is okay. It's at 430k, and I think that's pretty good for SSF with attribute stacking. And then let's go over the items. Pillar of the Cage Gods, these are my rings. This is the one I'm currently using. This unset ring is really nice, so I can get shield charge and blink on a secondary. And then I'm running this prismatic ring to give me some flat damage to help out. I have plenty of other ring combinations that work out. For example, I used to use, I can just use like 2 prismatic rings like this one, and I think this one is pretty good too. And I have a bunch of other ones that are like kind of respectable. I have this one breach ring that's okay too, but honestly this is the best ring combo I've found. And it still gets me a decent, I don't know why it's blinking, but it gets me a decent amount of rarity as well, 93. Whereas I could spec more. I used to actually run something closer to this, which was 2 unset rings, and then this was only elemental resist and rarity, and that one definitely helped me out with resist better, but my DPS was considerably worse, so that was one of the ones I used to run. Boots wise, it's not the craziest thing. This one is 220 with some resists, the intelligence is low, and unfortunately the cold resist is low. I do have some better boots. If I was more willing to run Tempest Flare, I don't like how it feels and gets stuck on rocks though. I would be using these boots instead, which give 319 energy shield, but that being, and a little bit better resistances. Some mana freeze duration is nice too, but I really like the movement speed plus Ice Strike, because with shield charge is a pretty good movement speed ability like this, and then you just simply cancel out shield charge at the end of its slow with a blink, and that feels pretty nice to traverse with throughout the map. Shield charge is nice because it doesn't get stuck on doorways like Tempest Flurry does. Like Tempest Flurry gets stuck on these random things all the time. Shield charge is like, if I like click even on it, it just like auto pass around it, which is so nice. So I really like shield charge. I have a 1 to 12 HOWA here. I'm not even going to talk about how unbalanced the uniques are. Obviously, Pillar Pillar of the Caged God, HOWA is broken. This combination, if you want to see how much damage HOWA is contributing to my build, take a random guess of how much I'm going to lose. What do you think? 50%? No. I lose like 75% of my DPS from not having HOWA. Ingenuity, I have an 85% here. And I think when it comes to chase uniques like Ingenuity and HOWA, I think they're in a pretty good state. Even Astra I think is fine. I don't think every build should have Astra, and I'm not expecting most players to get it. I used to run this amulet before I had Astra, and that one was pretty good. When I had crit going on, I had roughly about 260k DPS, but now with Astra, obviously now I have 400k. I think that's fine. I think Astra could stay as rare it is currently, and I think it's still pretty fair. I would like to see more stellar amulets come into the game, though. Not that much more, but maybe like 30% more, I think would be fine. Overall, it's fine. Let me talk about what I think about the League mechanics, or at least the Atlas mechanics, which are Breaches, Mirrors of Delirium, and Expedition Encounters. I think Breaches and Mirrors of Delirium give you a nice, healthy amount of tablets to play with, and it doesn't feel bad at all. But that being said, I think Expedition and Ritual definitely could give more. On top of that, I do think Ritual in particular, they do need to up the rate of Audience of the King, and I'm okay with them lowering the rate of Ingenuity, respectively, to compensate for that. That being said, Ingenuity is one of the only good belts. I also do have a Headhunter belt as well here, but I don't use it because it just doesn't feel as nice to gear with as Ingenuity. I also have this other Ingenuity here at 77%. Here's the Headhunter. And Pillar of the Caged Gods is great because it's an item you just basically find on the floor and you can make it good very quickly, and there's a bunch of them that you can find. Even a 3-socket Pillar of the Caged God isn't that much worse DPS than a 12% one. As you see, it's only 10% worse, which I think is a fair trade-off for how easy it is to get, which is probably warrants nerfs. The Collapsing Horizon is another one that I wanted to use. This is a decent Collapsing Horizon that I found, but unfortunately, obviously the DPS doesn't really compare. I would obviously build different. I would be building differently. If I were to use a Collapsing Horizon, because of its really high crit chance, I would be going much more heavy crit, and I could probably get it to, my guess is like, what, 200k DPS, which I think is still respectable. But again, that's not talking about that. So when it comes to these Expedition encounters, these League mechanic encounters, I think Leagues are fine. I think Mirrors are boring when you distill the maps and the waystones themselves like this, which is pretty much mandatory when you want to farm Splinters. I think the Mirrors themselves, I would like to see it that the Splinters are higher when you're actually running them than if you were distilling them. Because unfortunately at the current state, you never really run the Delirium maps, because it's better just to grind out the Splinters and then do the Simulacrum for the actual distilled, like whatever you need. And that's how I was able to farm my Isolations. I don't actually run the Delirium. And I do think the Delirium encounter is interesting and fun to run, but unfortunately it's just not worth running compared to just spamming more Rituals, Expeditions, or even more Breach tablets and like Boss tablets. Even Radiation tablets are probably more worth it to run than Delirium ones at the current moment. So I think that kind of sucks for Delirium. Speaking of Radiation, these kind of suck. So hopefully 0.2 answers some of these concerns, and I really hope they do. Boss tablets, they allow up to 7. I honestly think they should roll from 6 to 8 instead of 5 to 7, but that's okay. Or sorry, 3 to 7. Because currently they're running 3 to 7. I think they should be running like 6 to 8 or 5 to 8 instead, is what I would like to see. When it comes to balancing, I think Rituals are fine. But Expeditions, the Remnants are too strong. You'll see some crazy mods like monsters gain 100% fire damage, or if you have the Atlas Tree Spec, it'll be 135%, which is absolutely bonkers. I think it's way too overkill. Those need to be gutted, and even if you need to gut the rewards by 50%, I'm okay with that. But the negatives are insane right now. I'm okay with negatives that brick certain builds, like immune to lightning damage, for example, or immune to cold damage, they can break certain builds. Like immune to cold damage kind of breaks mine. If I run cold and lightning, I can't do anything, which I'm okay with. But things like monsters gain 40% pen is crazy, and I think that needs to be nerfed. That's just way too much. Elemental penetration, way too much elemental damage, and you combine that with a skill tree that doesn't really give you high EHP, and it's impossible to do expeditions effectively. I've tried builds where I nuke my damage. I don't take Jack of Trades, I don't take Polyphemy. I stop all the pathing pretty much here. I max out more evasion with high alert, and then I take all of these sorcerer, this basically sorcerer starts for the maximum energy shield. You know, pure energy, these energy shield ones, dampening, insightfulness, melding. I even take this one up here, and guess what happened? I got one shot. That's with meditate, going to basically about 15k energy shield. I got one shot. That being said, maybe with the heroic tragedy Rana, I wouldn't have gotten one shot. I would have gotten two shot, but I still feel like that's so overkill that Remnants can basically not respect your entire build when it comes to defensive stats, and no matter who you are, just nuke you. Unless you're a gemling with Ghost Strife, in which case you have 90k energy shield. I guess you might be respected. That's a funny build, but other than that, I do think when it comes to the overall state of crafting, finding items, I do think finding a good weapon really aids. When it comes to particularly getting a weapon to be good after getting 4 good mods on it is insanely hard. So what I mean by that is I fully agree with GGG's mentality of having bases become valuable, and like finding a good base on the floor should be exciting rather than finding a white item on the floor and crafting off of it. Giving too much determinism makes it, it really does make it so that nothing really matters of what you find on the floor, and things mattering on the floor is what makes this game go around. But at the same time, once you're on 4 to 5 good mods and you feel like you have no control, that's when it starts to feel from fun to bad. So I've had some okay quarterstaffs that have kind of like been passable, serviceable. As an example, I have this advanced barrier quarterstaff that I used for a really long time, which has, you know, a decent amount of flat fizz, and it has the increased elemental. I should have probably divined this before. I really should have divined this before I evolved it, but whatever. But unfortunately, it didn't roll crit bonus, and the crit chance was kind of low. I wasn't willing to drop a whittling on this, and unfortunately, this weapon, even when I was building crit, it wasn't getting above 160k DPS. Even now, it's only at 120k, and I have an Astra and HOWA. But Pillar of the Cage Gods is 400k. So I was able to get around this because I'm playing Invoker, who can run Pillar of the Cage Gods. And I can understand, like, a Blood Mage could also run... I think they run that Sanguine staff, the Linguini staff, whatever that thing's called. And yeah, having a unique weapon basically helps you circumvent dealing with that stuff. I know they're releasing a Gladiator weapon in the future, and I don't even know if that thing's any good. But yeah, right now, in the current state, finding a good weapon is not great. I think Armors is fine because... just because the pool for Armors isn't as, like, bad, that you can have so many combinations. When it comes to, like, rings and stuff going in an Ingenuity combo, having one piece not necessarily have everything is fine, because you can have another piece that kind of, like, rounds out the build when you're going Ingenuity. And I think that's fine. But guess what? That makes a problem. Ingenuity becomes your only good belt. So I hope they do make charms better. I wouldn't mind, like, the elemental ones just strictly, like, being active all the time, to be honest, at this point, because I feel like that's what they need to be able to compete with these insanely strong bonuses from Ingenuity. Like the Ruby charm, the Topaz charm, and the Sapphire charm, they're not... if these added, like, maximum resistance instead of regular resistance, but at a lower amount. Like, you know, obviously 25% cold resist is a lot, but if this was like plus 15%, maybe that's even too much, maybe like plus 10% max cold resist, I might actually consider using it. And that being said, like the charges also would need to be buffed and stuff like that. Just charms overall, I think if you wanted them to be the saving grace for like elemental resistances, then that would be like the first step. I think these need to do maximum resistances instead of regular. Amethyst Charm, same thing, similar thoughts. I do think Thawing Charm, Dowsing Charm, and Stone Charm are getting good active use. I'm using Thawing Charm when I'm mapping. I'm using Stone Charm when I'm doing Simulacrum. And if I had an extra charm slot, or if I wanted to grab the extra charm slot from Hunter's Talisman, then I would use Dowsing Charm, because Dowsing Charm is probably the more dangerous for my build, which is, you know, being ignited with my energy shield. What else do I want to talk about? I do think chase items like Astra and Ingenuity are in a good state. Even HOWA and Morior Invictus. And like the rates of Ingenuity when you fight, when you actually are able to get a fight with the Kingdom Mist is fair. Hands of Wisdom in action are also fair just because you get so many splinters. Speaking of splinters, please make the splinters just drop in one spot. I know people have been begging for this since Path of Exile 1, but that needs to happen so fast because it's so AIDS. No one wants to play the game to pick up freaking Breach Splinters, Breach Splinter, Breach Splinter. It's so AIDS. We're begging. We're begging. That being said, whole drop rate itself is fine. Even though picking up the splinters is more time than the actual freaking breach, it makes me want to bleach. I think it's fine. The drop rate of it is fine. Morior Invictus, I don't know about this one. I think it's fine just because of how good it is. And you don't really need it. I was really content using other pieces anyway. I feel like a Morior Invictus is like on Astramentus level of importance in terms of DPS, but at the same time it's like so endgame that I think you can play without it. Like I used to run just chest piece, or these were the two chest pieces I used to run, which was, you know, obviously way tankier but way less DPS, and I think that's a fair trade-off if you ask me. I think these were extremely fair trade-offs. This one has way more EHP, but this one is really good for acrobatics, but this one is DPS through the roof and rarity. Speaking of item rarity, I do think item rarity is in a good state. I know a lot of players were upset that it felt mandatory to have item rarity, but obviously they quickly backpedaled once they figured out it was diminishing returns, which, if you ask me, I feel like there should be a little bit more. I'm not a drama stoker, but I feel like there should be some more drama about people just spilling their thoughts about rarity and not having tested it. But anyway, it's kind of interesting. You know, you can just talk shit about rarity and talk shit about the game and not having actually tried it yourself. All right. Let me think. But if they were, oh yeah. So I also want to talk about Citadels, because I was more hesitant to talk about Morior Invictus. Although I was lucky to get a Morior Invictus, I do feel like Citadels themselves, although hunting, if you're explicitly hunting for Citadels, which I'm not, because I got spooned for Morior and I don't care. If I was to hunt for one, I feel like it's kind of annoying. They did make it easier to find by looking into the Fog of War and looking for these beams, but I do think that the beams need to be displayed no matter where, without caring about how close you are, because right now you have to actually kind of get close to it to see the beam. So that's one that's available, obviously, but like, for example, I don't know where any Citadel is from here on out, because one, there's rendering issues like you just saw right there, but I don't know if there's a Citadel here. You can't even zoom out far enough to see the Citadel, so they need to let me zoom out, and it should just show beam, 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 and so I know which direction to go in immediately. Like this. This is too close. I see these, right? But they need to be showing like even when I'm like this far, not even remotely looking at the map, like I think overall, yeah, like all of these, this one's pretty good. This one's pretty good. But again, it looks like they're only showing when I'm like kind of close. I would like them to be showing like even this far and this far when I literally can't see anything. That's what I would like to see. Let me talk about the endgame jewels. Now, what I'm referring to are the From Nothing and the Megalomaniac jewels, and even to an extent the Heroic Tragedy jewel, which I don't have yet. So the From Nothing jewel is something you get from the King of the Mists. Now, they give you a random passive that lets you allocate to your trade. I'm not even going to talk about the mechanics. You guys are, if you're here, you probably are here to hear me ramble and not to actually explain these mechanics. Basically, these drop corrupted. I think if you want them to be this rare, that's bullshit. Because you're just a lot of time going to get a load of dog shit. Something that's unusable. And same thing for Megalomaniac. This dropped like this, and what am I going to do with this? It takes me like 30 minutes of mapping to get a simulacrum key. I run that simulacrum key. It took me a while to even be able to get it built strong enough to run it, by the way. It takes me maybe like 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes to run a simulacrum. I clear it. So let's say 45 minutes. I don't know what the drop rate of this. I heard it's either 3% or 6%. Let's say 6%. So you're telling me I have to grind for like 8-9 hours to see a Megalomaniac? That's probably gonna be dog shit. I think that's a load of shit. I think that's a load of shit. That being said, I know I'm getting other things at the same time while I'm doing simulacrum, but oh my god. That means I'm gonna be running gray map after gray map for 8-9 hours. I don't want to see gray and have my entire color scheme be gray. So I think it should go either the same route as Divine Orbs, as the Heroic Tragedy, which is allow me to divine. I'm sitting on 60 divines that I would want to use. Let me divine this thing so it can get different annoyance and at least try for something different if you want it to be in the current rarity that it is. Otherwise, just please make it so that it drops literally like 3 to 4 times more commonly. Because the only, for non-SSF players, the only players that can actually afford to see these things at a reasonable rate are people who can buy the simulacrum keys and actually run it themselves 24/7. And guess what? There you have another problem. It's called freaking, I'm not here to play a video game to see wealth disparity. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not here to see the top 10% be able to do everything. As an SSF player, I want to be able to participate realistically with this mechanic. And I feel like right now, like, I'm not able to actually grind a Megalomaniac. And then same thing for the From Nothing. He's actually marking it. Now, the Heroic Tragedy, yes. Because it's divinable, I'm okay with it being really annoyingly rare right now. But it still does feel really bad. And I want to address why I think it feels bad. To grind out the Heroic Tragedy jewel. Now, I think the rate of logbooks feels fine, which is roughly from what I see, every 2 to 3 expeditions I'll get a logbook, and sometimes I'll even get spoon-fed like 2 to 3 logbooks in an expedition, depending on the RNG of the maps. But the fact that the boss only spawns 1 and 4 is an instant leave, and I wouldn't mind the boss spawning 1 and 4 if these currencies were actually worth something. So hopefully, if these currencies do something valuable, because unfortunately the amount of time it takes for me just to like flip through these and like craft and craft and craft and probably still get something terrible is this time I could be spending doing simulacrum and grinding out simulacrum and just getting more items that way. It's the way I currently see it. So I don't really see why I'm going to be grinding these currencies ever. The only thing that doing the expeditions in those actual, expedition logbooks is to get more tablets, but you don't get that many tablets from them either. So, yeah. So hopefully that helps that in the future. Probably gonna put the game down after this because I don't think it is worth it to grind Megalomaniac, or at the moment Heroic Tragedy maybe seems worth my time, but with the league ending in roughly about 3 weeks, I'm not really sure even if that's worth it. I just kind of want a really good build. So yeah. Oh, I do have some thoughts about crafting. Actually, I wanted to explain further. So when it comes to crafting, what, in my opinion, the solution for late game crafting would be is the 4 to 6 mod area, where it feels like you have to rely on omens. Not only do I think omens need to be more common, but I do think I wouldn't mind having a grand essence. Right now we're up to greater essences. An essence that lets you craft onto a rare mod with 1 modifier, but have that essence be extremely rare. And I'm talking like currently as rare as like finding a greater essences, not crafting one, but currently as finding a greater essences, I think is fair. So that you can basically use an omen to annul the last one, and then use an essence to craft the last mod you need. And hopefully it's a good roll. I'm okay with that because, for example, this ring is really good, except for the cold invasion, right? I would like to be able to, so we're on 4 good mods is how I'm currently seeing it. Debatably, the rarity of items is also shit, but whatever. We're at either 3 or 4 good mods, and I feel like right now I'm not willing to chaoses and risk the fire resist or the elemental resist being destroyed. The fire damage, fire resist, or all elemental. Like, I'm not willing to risk that right now, so I'm just gonna leave it in the bank, and it's gonna sit there and rot forever until I get the balls to chaos it one day with a whittling, which I didn't even check, which is the lowest mod. It doesn't actually work in lowest tier. It works on some weird system. I don't know. Anyway, I think deaths are pretty punishing as they are now. If they made this omen more common, I'd be okay with it. But right now, this omen, I think I've died enough that I've used up pretty much all of these except the current one I have. So I do think dying is a bit too punishing at the moment. I would be okay with them setting the map as complete once you die there, and just like zeroing it out in the current iteration of the Atlas map. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Overall, I think my build is pretty good for an SSF build, but I'm at the point where I don't really want to play due to the jewel grind. Thank you very much.